Hello everybody and welcome to the second practical Flask tutorial video. In this video we're going to be just continuing along building our website. So now that we've done sudo apt-get upgrade, luckily I'm pretty quick here and I'm still connected, but you'll find that after a pretty short period of time of inactivity you're going to lose connection. It's going to disconnect you. And it's kind of like it basically is a timeout. And so it's a security measure where if you're inactive for X amount of time, it just disconnects. And that's a good idea, but it can get annoying sometimes. Now, because I'm filming a tutorial on it, it's conceivable that I talk for so many seconds and then all of a sudden we're disconnected. It's very annoying sometimes. Or you're not sure how to do something, so you go to Google, you look it up, and you come back and you're disconnected. It's a good idea for sure on your development server. Not necessarily a big deal on a, it's a good idea for sure on your production server, but not really sure it's that necessary on a development server. Again though, it is a security kind of thing in place, so change at your own risk. But that's what we're going to talk about now. And what better time to discuss how developers develop in reality than this. This is the #1 developer tool I'm about to show you. It's not really a secret, but kind of. And that is this tool right here. Sorry. This is what developers use, honestly. So my curiosity, let's say, is I'm not sure how to stop this dang timeout. So let's say SSH timeout Linux, and look at that. First option, I've already clicked it, but that's it. SSH timeout Linux. How to disable it? So we'll click on that link, and we're like, okay, what do we do? We're seeing a bunch of this nastiness. Basically, we're looking for some sort of command line stuff and in the file. So generally, you've got a configuration file. Looks like we just found it. So we're going to look for SSH config. But you're going to learn that there's a couple of different kind of meanings of things depending on the operating system. So first, let's go to that directory. So that directory was let's do cd etc ssh. Let's just go there first. And then, so cd for change directory, and then you give the full path to that directory that you want to go to. And let's do ls, and this lists out the stuff in here. So we see we do have an SSH config, and we also have an SSHD config. And someone can correct me, I believe the D is for daemon, but I might be wrong. Anyway, so now to open it, we're going to use sudo for superuser_do, and then nano, and then we'll first open up SSH config, since that's what the internet says. So we come in here, and we're kind of looking around, and it doesn't look like there's really much here in this file. And if we kind of look here as far as their setting suggestions, let's say alive or keep alive is the one I usually use to find. So to find something within a file in nano, Control W, and then let's say we search for keep alive. And it says keep alive not found. It's just not here. So this might not be the file we want. Let's check out SSHD config instead. So sudo nano. If you want to basically rewrite the previous line, you hit the up arrow. And instead of SSH config, we'll do SSHD config. Now again, Control W, keep alive. And lo and behold, there it is. So what was the stuff that it was suggesting again? We'll come back to the lovely internet here. Basically this line here. So we've got some stuff here that maybe we don't understand, but we can clearly see this 99999. That's probs what we're thinking is going to be, this really long-winded, over 9,000 number. So we'll copy that, and we see at least one of these, TCP keep alive, is already here. So we'll come here, and a way you can delete a whole line in nano is Control K. Boom, done. Now, after you've copied something to paste, you just right-click, and bam, there it is. And then just kind of watch out because you see this little comment here. It shouldn't make any problem because it is a comment, but if it wasn't a comment, it would cause some trouble. But anyway, we'll hit enter, done. Now we want to save and exit, so Control X will exit. It's asking if we want to save it. Y for yes. This is the file name, as long as you want to save it the same file name. Enter. Done. So now we have, in theory, a very long timeout, but of course we need to actually, since we modified the SSH service, so now we need to restart that service. So service SSH restart. Done. And that's it. So now we have this kind of unlimited login and a brief introduction to the #1 developer tool. Moving along, we're ready to kind of set up this website now. So coming back over here, this is another developer tool. And honestly, when I develop stuff, and almost every developer I know, they tend to go back to their previous work and like reference their previous work to move forward. So generally you hear about people say they've got a cookbook, right? That's their own private stash of code that they've used to do all kinds of stuff. My cookbook just so happens to be online and in tutorial form a lot of times on pythonprogramming.net, but we're going to use one of them right now. So we're going to come over to web dev, and we're interested in this second one right here. So that's all of this code that we're about to run now. But just in case there wasn't one there, let's go back, and instead of SSH timeout, let's say deploy Flask Linux, okay? And we have a couple of options here. We've got the Flask mega tutorial from Miguel here, but then there's also this how to deploy a Flask application on an Ubuntu VPS. Well, that sounds a lot like us. Let's click on that bad boy and see what they have to offer. So they've got some stuff here, and then wouldn't you know it, here's a bunch of command line options for setting up exactly what we want to do. And so again, perfect, and it's basically a bunch of copy and paste. You just copy and paste all these little commands here, and chances are you'll probably wind up with a server. It's worth a shot. What we're going to use here, it's basically the same thing. I have changed a few things. We're going to at least start off with a few different installations, a couple of tweaks here and there, but for the most part it's almost identical to this one. So again, if you weren't sure how to do it, just Google it. Honestly, the best resource you'll ever find. So anyway, we're going to come here and we're going to begin. So we're just going to start running all these commands. So first we've got this sudo apt-get install Apache, and in fact, let me do this just so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. I hate to like go back and forth, and I hate to just not show so that someone gets like lost. But you could probably run through these all on your own anyway. But anyway, let's just do this. Windows. Okay, so first we're going to get this, and I'll explain kind of what these are. We've got Apache for running servers, MySQL is for the database. We want both MySQL client and the server. Do we want to continue? Yes. And that's going to go through, and then we're going to get this other thing here, and we'll wait, I guess, for this. Oh, we're going to set up the MySQL root user, not to be confused with the root user of your server. So if you're using the root user of your server, that's different than the root user of the MySQL server. Okay, you can make the password the same if you want. Probably not the best idea though, so keep that in mind. So anyway, I'm going to set this password. I'm going to set it again. Done. Okay, don't forget that password, by the way. So that's MySQL. That's what the database that we're going to be using. There's also SQLite. SQLite's great for kind of local versions or really light versions of a database, but I don't really think it makes a good production database. So what's the point in using it in development? This is taking a lot longer. I swear that this whole thing, like upgrade took forever and this took forever. Anyway, that's done. Now we're going to go ahead and copy the next command. So copy, right click, and we'll go. And what was this? This is a libapache mod wsgi. This is so we can use wsgi. It's honestly, I don't understand wsgi very much. We'll talk about wsgi in a little bit. Okay, we didn't need to do that. That was already done. But mod wsgi is basically the way that we're going to be able to actually use Flask as a developmental framework, and so it's really helpful to us. But there's a couple of bugs that come with, not really bugs, but I don't know, I'm not really sure what else to call them, but they're pretty confusing, and no one's ever been able to give me a good answer on mod wsgi. So anyway, we'll talk about those when we get there though. But yeah, it gets kind of confusing. Anyway, we've already enabled, so now we want to cd into var www, which was created when we installed right up here for Apache and stuff. So if you were going to create, say, a PHP website, that would have been the same line that you ran, and you would store all your files there. Anyway, let's cd into var www now. And just for the record, we were in etc ssh, so let me go back there just in case. I'm sorry if you guys are, pro terminal users, but for those of you who are not, if you start with a /, right, it basically treats it like the beginning, like the root of the directory. There's a lot of uses of the word root, so it can be confusing. But what if we were in etc ssh and so when we did var www, we actually changed directory into the very beginning. So let's say you're on Windows and the very beginning is c:/, right? And then you've got a bunch of directories. So that would be as if we went all the way back to the root of c:/. But then what if you're in etc ssh and we instead said cd var without a / www? Well, it would look for a directory called var within etc ssh, and it will probably say it doesn't exist. Right. So keep that in mind. Those slashes are very important. So anyway, going back to var www, what do? Well, first we're going to make dir this Flask app. That makes a directory called Flask app. Easy enough. Now we're going to cd into that Flask app directory. Now we're going to make dir another Flask app. Let me scroll down a little bit here. And again, we're going to cd into Flask app, so changing directory. Now we're going to make two directories in here. We're going to make first static, and then we're also going to make templates. And now we're going to sudo nano init.py. And that basically is going to open init.py. It doesn't exist, so it's going to create it temporarily at least. So we create it. Here we are. And now we're going to put some starting code into init.py. So let's just copy this code. Copy, right click. And the code, what it's doing, from Flask, import Flask. So we're importing Flask. We're specifying the name of our Flask, basically our application for Flask, and assigning it to this app var. Then we're saying the app root. This is basically the URL to get to this page that we're going to define right here. So this is the root to it, so basically the home page, which we've called the home page, and it returns, hi there, how you doing? So this is the code that's required to get us there. App root is required to be just like app root. You can call this function anything you want, as long as it's syntactically and grammatically correct, or I guess syntactically is the only word. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. We call it home, I don't know, anything you wanted. Anyway, and then return, this normally can return things like templates, so HTML templates with Jinja templating and some crazy stuff which we'll get to. But right now it's just going to return a string of hi there, how you doing? Then finally, if name equals main, we run the application. So hopefully we'll go to the address and it'll run. In the basic series, we actually made the address an actual domain. I showed you guys how to do that. In this one, I'm not really going to focus too much on the domain. If you really want to know, check that one out. It's kind of a longer process. So we're going to actually just utilize the IP address of our server. That will get you there. You guys will be able to actually look at this server so long as it's up before I nuke it. I'm not going to always keep it up because I don't think it's a good idea to have two identical websites up anyways. So anyway, but anyone can access it, including you. You'll be able to access your own website via the IP address in the address bar. Anyway, that's that. Control X. Again, Y to save. Enter because that's the same name. Done. We've created our init.py. Now, we already ran the update and upgrade, so we don't need to do that. And now we're going to use sudo apt-get to install Python's pip module. Yes. And that runs, and then after that we're going to install virtual environment. And this is kind of like a way to have Python in literally a virtual environment. And that's where we'll actually install Flask and run all the stuff from Flask. It's kind of a safer-ish way to do things, and just a smarter way to keep your web server separate from your real server. So anyways, pip install virtual environment. Done. Now we're going to create a virtual environment that we're calling venv. And that's it. Now we can activate that virtual environment if we want, and then to deactivate, you just type deactivate. But first we want to pip install Flask in our virtual environment. Well, that's okay. It's done. And then now we can do sudo python init.py. So do that real quick. And as long as you don't get any errors, it's running. But as we can see, it's actually only running locally. So whenever you see 127.0.0.1, that's a local IP address, and basically it's just your home. So that's no good for like a web server. But if you're you're following along on a Raspberry Pi, You could pull, or any Linux-based operating system, or I guess any operating system that you've gotten this far on. You can visit 127.00.1:5000, and there will be your website. But we're going to continue moving on so we can actually view this anywhere. So Control-C to break that, and then we're going to type deactivate. And now you can see that we're no longer in the virtual environment because we don't have this venv in front of our root there. Now what we're going to do is we want to set up the Flask configuration file. So that's what this line does. So copy, paste. Here we are, and again we're just going to copy and paste all of this code here. No sense in writing it yourself. I don't know anybody who would. Right click. Besides the original person who wrote this, I suppose. Virtual host, port 80 for HTTP. I mean, this is typical stuff. Server name. Now, for server name, that's where you're going to put the IP address to your actual application. So let me pull this up here real quick. I forget what the IP was, but I can get it really quick. You can also use if config. That will give you your IP. My IP is the following. So for server name, if you had a domain, you would put your domain name right there. So on pythonprogramming.net, for example, I have pythonprogramming.net. Also, if you have, say for example, you want to be accessed via pythonprogramming.net and say www.pythonprogramming.net, you'll just copy and paste and add www here. So I'll show you that in a second. But anyway, so pythonprogramming.net, but that's not what we want here for this development server. My IP is 104.236.44.192. Put your IP there. Then if you want, you can add an email here. It's like an email for, like, if you have like a 500 error, you'll see that email. Otherwise, that's it. Unless you change the directory names where you stuffed the Flask app, you don't need to change any of this stuff here. But if you did, change those names. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. And again, so like if you did want to do www, I'll just show it really quick. Copy, come down, paste, and then literally add the www there. I'm not really sure if it'll work with an IP, but I assume it would. We'll just leave it there. I'm curious, I suppose. So Control X, yes to save, and we're done there. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is sudo a2, so Apache 2 enable the site. That looks like it didn't do anything. Let me just right click or copy that one more time. Done. It's enabled. We'll run that reload that it's asking us to. Reloads it. Now we need to set up the WSGI file. So we're going to cd var www flask app, so the initial Flask app, sudo nano this flask app.wsgi, and now we'll copy all of this, copy, paste. Interesting that this isn't. I swear in the past this looks like a, it treats it like it's a string. Anyway, delete what's there for now, your secret key, and add your secret key. So just for now, put like a little jumbly of letters here. Okay, just something. That's that. Control X, yes to save. And I suppose before we go, this is the WSGI. Again, WSGI is so you can actually have Flask as your back end. WSGI is heck confusing to me. So if you understand WSGI, congratulations. It ain't me. So anyway, save, yes. It's like driving a car, right? A lot of stuff, you can use it, and you don't need to know how an internal combustion engine works to get the utility out of your car. You can do some cool stuff with WSGI, and of course not knowing too much about it, one of the problems that arises is what I'll show you guys later, as far as every time we make an edit we have to restart Apache. You can make a script that reads every time you make an edit and restarts Apache for you, but that is the same thing as just doing it yourself. I'd rather have something, I don't know, built into the WSGI that works. I had someone suggest it to me, right over my head. So anyway, moving on. So here, now we'll restart Apache. That restarts the web server. You'll be doing a lot of this for the reasons like I just said. And then now, let's do if config. I already forgot the IP already. Where is it? Here. So our internet address is this. So now you should be able to go to your web browser and literally type that in. So 104.236.44.192. Enter. And you should see, hi there, how you doing? Again, by the time you guys are watching this tutorial, that won't be what's here on this IP. I might not even have this server anymore. Eventually I'm going to nuke it and get rid of it. I'm just using it for these tutorials, but if you were around right when I was making this, you too could visit this domain or this IP address, and you would see my website. Also, just curious if we can do the www. No, I think the problem is because of all the periods. But if you had a regular domain, that would work. Anyway, that's it for this series, or this video. The series is not over, I promise. Yeah, there you guys go. That's how to make a website. Done. Don't forget to like. Anyway, that's not it. That's it for this video. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support and subscriptions. And until next time.